Good evening. The name of the show is Life Ahead. If you have not watched us before, I think you'll enjoy our topic tonight. We're going to be talking legal show. We're going to talk about probate tonight. And you're really lucky because we have the probate expert here with us tonight. We have Magistrate Phillip Houk, and we also have Jesica Thornson, an attorney, and she deals a lot with her clients with probate. So if you have any questions about that, we encourage you to call. The number is 969-2720. And if you live out a 260 area code, just put an 866 in front of it and it'll be toll free for you. Okay, if you haven't met him before on Life Ahead, and he comes to visit us probably once a year. This is Magistrate Phillip Houk. Once a year. For how many years did we figure you've been coming?
Oh, I don't know, 15, 20, 15. Maybe something like that. I think I missed 1 year in there. But,
you did. You did.
That's a whole other story.
I know. Well,
but I do look forward to this, and it's always good to see you every year, Sandy.
Thank you. Well, he always says that when he walks in the door on his month. We've missed you, and nice to be back. Usually, though, for some reason, it's the end of the year, so it's nice to have you here toward the beginning of the year.
Well, we usually do a Christmas show. You're right. It's been December almost every time, but this year just a couple months later. So.
Okay. Well, Merry Christmas in advance.
Thanks very much.
Come back in December if you want.
Belated.
Okay. Yes. And Jessica, always good to have you with us. Jesica Thornson. She's been on Life Ahead regularly for many years.
Many years.
Do you know how many years?
Oh, I would say maybe about 13, 14.
Wow.
Yes. My kids were little. They used to wonder why Mom wasn't talking to them on the TV. And so now they're teenagers, and
so now
they're definitely not paying attention. Yeah, no.
Did they think, they don't think you're a big deal then because you're on TV?
No, and in fact, if somebody recognizes me in the grocery store, I kind of get one of those teenage eye rolls.
I get that. How about your family? Do you have children?
I do. My children are all grown, and they're all making their way in the world right now. It's spread out across the country.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but we see it. We've got Denver, Indianapolis, and New York City covered.
Oh, well, that's
nice places to visit.
Right.
Wonderful.
I was going to say, for you, that's perfect. You can go west, go east, and visit them.
Yep.
Well, I'm glad that both of you are with us tonight. And again, I encourage all the rest of you to give us a call here if you have any questions. And by the way, if you will talk live to us here in the studio, that's the best if you wouldn't mind doing that. That way, if Jessica or the magistrate have questions back to you, you're right there to answer them. And if it's a private question, if you want to give us a different name, that's okay. We don't care. We don't care as long as we get the question. And if you're not comfortable doing that, we do have a phone screener operator that will take your question and type it up and send it out to me here on the teleprompter, and then I'll ask him the question. We have no rules for the show, so it's pretty easy. And we have no commercials either, by the way. We'll just be going straight through for this half hour. All right, let's talk about probate, first of all. And I'll ask you, Magistrate, to define it, if you will. What is probate, and when did it start?
Well, probate is, there's a broad definition, but for purposes of what we're talking about tonight, it's the administration of people's assets after they pass away. They're winding up of their affairs, so to speak.
Okay.
After they pass away, we think in terms of written wills, trusts, and things of that nature. Probate, I said it off the air, and I think it's really true, is probably the oldest form of law.
Oh, really?
And I did some research on this a number of years back, and it kind of goes back to the Magna Carta and all that back in.
Really? That's interesting.
I think it goes back to cavemen, and here's why. Because think about it. What people would die. Okay, cavemen would die, and they would have maybe a club, and they'd have a few skins and stuff like that, and there'd be a free-for-all, right? Well,
sure.
Whatever.
Joe said I can have this. No, I'm his wife, I get it.
Yeah, and they'd go in and they'd just grab it. There are no rules. And so I think probably early cavemen, Neanderthal, whatever, would probably figured out pretty quick that we need to have some sort of rule as to what happens to somebody's property after they pass away.
And
it's a natural.
Somebody that can make those rules, the leader.
Well, you have to have somebody that can enforce them. That's for sure.
The guy with the biggest club, probably.
And probably that's what it was at that time. But I think I've said it in terms. Probate probably came about as a way to avoid free-for-alls, which it would be if there were no rules as to who gets your stuff.
It would be
right?
nowadays. It would be nowadays.
Of course
if
it
we
would.
didn't have
There has to be
final.
an orderly way of passing that property on.
Well, Jessica, specializing in elder law, I imagine that a lot of people come to you and say, what do I do next? How can we finish settling the estate?
So it always starts with a conversation just to figure out what somebody actually owned. How was it titled? Was it joint with somebody? Was there a payable on death designation? Was there a beneficiary designation? What did you really own and how was it titled? So it starts there. And then we try to figure out from there, where do we go? How do we actually administer those assets? There are different mechanisms depending on the value of those assets, the nature of those assets. And so we really just got to start with information gathering and then we go from there.
Okay, okay. Now, why do we get to probate? I mean, why does somebody end up coming to see you, Judge?
Well, they would come to see me because they, in almost every case, they've seen their lawyer and they realize that there are some assets that need to be transferred. You know, let's talk about, let's say, a brokerage account.
Yeah.
Or just a savings account.
Yeah.
And if it was in the name of the deceased person only, there has to be some official determination as to who's supposed to get that. And that may be because of a directive that was in a will, if there is a will. If there's not a will, then the law would define who gets those assets, but then it's the court
And
that
that
oversees.
becomes you.
Yeah, the court makes sure that it goes to who it's supposed to go to, whether it's through a will or if there wasn't a will, based upon what the law of intestacy, that's without a will, would say.
All right, we
And that's
have a
when you'd
phone
come to
call
see me?
already.
All
I
right.
knew you'd be popular tonight, Judge. We have Rod calling in. Rod, thank you for watching us here. And what is your question for our guest this evening?
Well, thank you for having me, Sandy. I
Thank
appreciate you having this show. My father died with 3 sons, a house, some other assets, and some debts. The 3 of us all know that his plan was to leave the house to one of those sons, and we're all in agreement about that. But we don't know if it's permissible for us to choose how to pay off those debts. That is, can we use the non-residential assets to pay off the debts and potentially things that are outside of probate if necessary? Or will the judge require us to sell the house and split everything evenly?
Okay, good question. And I would imagine that there are a lot of people that have a similar
Yeah,
problem.
and there's just one preliminary question. Rod, did your father have a will?
Not a properly executed one.
Okay, fair. I
okay.
think I'll turn this one over then to Jessica because I'm sure she's got some pretty good ideas.
Yeah, so when there isn't a will, we have to look at to make sure that the 3 kids are really truly the only heirs, that there aren't any additional heirs. But after that, we can kind of look at, is the debt related to the house in any way? Do you know, Rod?
It's not.
Okay, it's all outside of a mortgage or a home equity line of credit or something of that nature. So then, yes, we can really kind of come up with a way to settle those debts outside of the house so that we can keep the house. But then dealing with the issue of who actually gets the house, that is also another issue that we have to deal with because you really do have 3 heirs. If you all want to sign off on one particular heir getting it, that is possible. We just have to kind of figure out the best mechanism to do that based on the value and how we're going to satisfy those debts outside of the home.
Now, he mentioned a truck. Can he sell the truck to pay off those outside debts and keep the house intact?
That may be part of the solution here. And the key thing here is hopefully everyone will be in agreement as the 3 heirs here.
Yes.
It sounds like you have 3 heirs to this estate. And if everybody's in agreement as to how this should be done, that's the way it can be done. Yeah. Truly.
Truly, yes. Oftentimes we like to memorialize those things just to make sure that, one, time marches on, people will forget, hey, what did we actually do in 2025?
Yeah.
And so sometimes we really do want to just put that, have some sort of document where we all agree and sign in writing, this is what we agreed to. Because memories fail us and time marches on. And so it is important sometimes, even if everybody's in agreement, to have some sort of formal documentation to make sure, okay, this is exactly how we were going to pay that debt, and then this is also how the house was going to be transferred.
And, you know, we may be talking beyond this generation. I mean, those siblings may all agree, but maybe in 15 or 20 years, one of their children or grandchildren will say, hey, how'd that work? That doesn't seem fair. Why don't we go back and fight that?
It could happen, and it's good to have that memorialized, as Jessica said, in writing, so that somebody can say, well, here's what happened back 25, 30 years ago. So,
Yeah.
But in a situation where the values here add up in the right way, but there are situations where the court could force a sale of the real estate, but it doesn't sound like that would be the case here.
Would that be if somebody had extreme debt?
Well, sure. If no one was agreeing. You know, sometimes folks will take money out of their own pockets to pay the debt so that you can keep the house intact, but a lot of times that's not the case. And if the debts exceed the other assets that you have, the truck, in this case, maybe there were some savings accounts, something of that nature. If the debts exceeded that and the family, no one was willing to step up to pay the debts, then you might have to sell the house in that situation. That does not sound like the situation that you have, Rod.
Sounds like, Rod, you have some good siblings if you're all agreeing on things. That's pretty good.
Yes.
Okay, we do have another call coming in right now from Ben, and I'll wait just a moment here till that comes across the screen, and I'll ask you about that. Meanwhile, Jessica, what's the difference between an executor and a personal representative? Is there any difference?
Not really. So Indiana uses the terminology personal representative. Other states may use the term executor, but essentially that is the same role. It is a fiduciary role. Your job is to make sure that you are collecting the assets, recognizing the debts, notifying the proper parties about what is happening, and really truly following the statute to make sure that you are fulfilling your fiduciary duty and that you're not, taking the money and going gambling or going on a vacation or things of that nature.
I think the terminology came around. Executor is the historical term. That's the male, the masculine form. Executrix is for a female. Personal representative, executrix.
I'm not sure I like that.
Personal representative is gender neutral.
Yes.
And so I think, and that's the terminology that's used in the statute.
I never knew that. That's pretty good.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah, that
Probate
is
I'm telling you, probate's great.
He always has something really fascinating to tell us. In fact, I wonder if you'll share with people what you think it is in terms of like what people should.
Should we use the prop?
Let's do that, because we have one right here. Let's talk about that. I've heard people so often say, I want to avoid probate. Should they or not?
And this is a famous book. What was his name? Norman Dacey. Came out in 1965, How to Avoid Probate. And I'll try and go through this quickly because I see we've got some other calls. But it really started what amounts to, it's not a cottage industry, it's a huge industry of everyone thinking they need to avoid probate.
Yes.
And most people, if you asked them and really dug into it, they don't even really know why. But they would say,
they just have heard people say.
I'm avoiding expenses, I'm avoiding delays. Trust me, there are situations where avoiding probate may make some sense. There's some privacy issues sometimes, but generally probate in the way it's configured today in the state of Indiana, it's very private.
Yes.
If you have to come into court, none of the information relating to assets is available. The cost to set up inter vivos trusts and things of that nature, if you want to avoid probate, there's going to be a cost involved during your lifetime. You lose some control of the assets.
Yes.
Probate's a pretty good system of getting moving assets around. But Dacey, who got an injunction against him for practicing law for writing this book back in 1965. So the guy that wrote
this wasn't even an attorney.
He wasn't even an attorney, but there's a lot of stuff in here. It's do it yourself, all these forms. But it sold millions of copies.
Yeah.
And it's been updated. I don't know if they've updated it recently. There's more other probate.
He's probably still being sued.
It might,
in the
maybe,
process of that,
but
maybe.
It's the whole idea of avoiding probate. I think you really need to think about that. It's not as bad, and the things that Dacey says in this book. I mean, I don't care if you want to avoid probate. Then I got less business, and I'm okay with that. I got plenty of business.
You can go home
So
early
I don't really have a dog in this fight, but probate's a pretty good system of transferring those assets. And we see, and I'll bet, Jessica, you do too, you see people all the time so worried about probate, and they get fixated, as they age particularly.
Yes.
They get so fixated on this issue. I got to avoid probate. I'm so worried about this. Well,
why?
It's not that bad, folks. And Jessica, tell us what you say to a client in that situation.
But I definitely say, well, why are you wanting to avoid probate? Let's talk about what your goals are, what your assets are, because that may not be the best situation for you. There are many circumstances where going through the probate process may actually be the cheapest and simplest way for your family to handle your assets. It is so case specific that it really isn't one size fits all. You can't always follow books like these because we've got to get down and into the weeds, so to speak, and really know about your assets and your goals that you're trying to accomplish and your family dynamics. Yeah. So let's have a 20-minute conversation about that and figure out what really is your biggest concern. Why do you feel you need to avoid it? And then let's figure out the best plan for you.
How about the issue of speed? That's what I always say. Oh, it's going to be tied up in probate. It'll last forever.
Yeah, people do say that.
We don't want that to happen.
Very, very rarely am I having estates open for years and years and years. Now, when we used to, back prior to 2013, when we had inheritance tax, there was a little bit of a delay because the Department of Revenue had to review all of those returns, and so there could be delays in that regard. But since 2013, our estates are administered very promptly. Oftentimes, the biggest issue isn't necessarily whether you're in probate or a will, it's do you have a complicated asset? Do you have a house that is just not selling?
Do you have something that needs to be sold?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Those are not specific to probate or a trust. That is specific to that particular asset.
That delay would occur even if you had a trust.
Exactly.
Before you could distribute it out. So, and I've characterized this in speeches I've given in the past over the years. You can pay me now or pay me later.
Yeah.
Now, if during your life, if you want to pay a lawyer to set up some complex estate plan that gives everything away before you die, have at it.
Right, and I've also shared with families, it's a question of do you want to do the work or do you want your children to do the work? Because oftentimes those trusts, that's a lot of management during your lifetime. I love to do trusts, but you do have to recognize, again, you can't just do it and forget about it. That's a living thing that you have to manage.
You're giving somebody, probably a relative, the job then of caretaking that forever, perhaps, or as long as the trust is still applicable.
It's a job, and being a personal representative is a job, and sometimes people fight over and say, "Oh, I want to be the person." Well, maybe you do, or maybe you don't. That's something. I'll just throw that in there too, because it's work. There's some work involved.
And even if it's a small estate, it's still work to do.
You got to pay the debts. You got to identify the debts. You got to pay those debts, and you got to liquidate assets. You got to clean out closets and all that stuff. So.
Yes.
So don't hold your hand up necessarily.
Right.
Well, what happens if no one's willing to be a personal representative? You've asked
I'll say,
relatives.
Well, there's usually some inertia. I mean, when I say inertia, that means somebody's going to want to get the assets administered. And maybe they don't. And if they don't, then things will sit there.
Okay.
That's true, but that's a real rare occurrence.
It is. It is really rare. I will say I do face that sometimes when we are dealing with the planning situation because families are living further apart. Maybe people have smaller families. And so the struggle sometimes with even getting people to come in to do these documents is they don't know who to designate. So, but I would rather you come in before something happens to you and let's have a discussion about all of the options that are available so that you know that it isn't just going to sit there and those final wishes are going to be honored. So I definitely see it from the planning side of things, but very rarely do things just sit. There are ways, I should say, to keep things moving.
I think we have Ben on the line. Is that correct? Ben, are you on the line with us?
Yes, I'm here. I'm here.
Okay, great. What is your question for us, Ben?
My father died a little bit over 10 years ago without a will, and he had a house, it was paid for. There was no mortgage on it, and there's me and my two younger brothers that are the beneficiary. He my youngest brother, me and my other brother made a deal with him. He was supposed to basically pay us for it over time, but he never made one payment. He's never done anything. And my other brother and I, we basically would like our cut. What do we do?
Well, Ben, I'll say one thing and get this started, and that is that probate, there's no statute of limitations on it, and anytime an asset needs to be administered, it can be administered, and occasionally that happens years and years and years after somebody passes away. So what would you, in this specific case, do, Jessica?
So I would want to have a meeting really with all three of you to make sure that we understand what's happening. And is it my understanding that you're all living in the house, or is just one of you living in the house?
It's just my youngest brother, and he's basically trying to avoid us. We're trying. He's basically saying, forget you guys. This is my place now. I've been here long enough.
Got it.
Yep. And so this is a situation where probate is actually going to help you. So Indiana does have mechanisms to transfer property outside of probate. But this situation, because you've got somebody who is being a bit uncooperative, probate is actually going to help you so that we can kind of push the issues along and actually get things to where they're supposed to be.
Okay, does that help, Ben?
Yeah. And just one more question: Where would I start to should I call you guys, or where would I start to get the ball rolling, I guess?
Yeah, so an elder law attorney could help you open the estate. They would help you get all the necessary information to actually file the documents needed with the court. I do believe there is some information out there in the internet world, but I don't know kind of what your thoughts are on that without an attorney involved.
I think particularly in the fact situation you've described, you're probably going to need some legal advice.
Yeah.
And if you know a lawyer, great. Even if they're not a probate lawyer, talk to them. They'll refer you to somebody that can do this.
Because they would need a lawyer before they could even come to you anyway as the probate.
Yeah. And that's absolutely, well, before you can file anything in our court. Or you can call the Allen County Bar Association. They have a lawyer referral service. Just look up the Allen County Bar Association, call their office. There's a nominal charge to get referred to a lawyer, and for that charge, you'll be able to sit down with a lawyer for a half hour and just get the basics of what's going on. So that's a good place to start. And they'll get you to somebody that practices probate law.
Sounds like good advice. Okay, good luck with that, Ben. We'd love for you to call back sometime and let us know how that worked out for you. Leonard, I believe, is on the line with us now. And what is your question, Leonard? No? Not on the line.
For car
okay,
titles?
I do have I have his question here. Leonard says, for car titles in Indiana, can you put on the title transfer at time of death? Does that make sense?
Yes,
Go
it
ahead,
does.
Jessica.
Yes, so there is a way to make vehicles or things that the DMV manages. I think it's all of like mobile homes, RVs, all of those type of things.
Oh, okay.
There is a transfer on death document that you can file with them so that it can be.
You can do that like anytime.
Yeah.
When you buy the car or camper or whatever.
Anytime as long as you own it, you can give it away.
As long as you have that title, yes.
And a lot of people, I think we've talked about this before, may put that in their will if they want to say donate their vehicle. You're looking at me like that.
No, you could do that.
Yeah, you could do that.
You can say, I want my vehicle to go to Cars for Kids.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
The commercial I see about 20
We know that
times a
commercial
day.
with the kids singing, right? Okay.
I can't understand the one girl, what she says, though, so
I don't think they're really playing those instruments
I
either.
don't think they are either. But they wear a lot of pink and black and white in the commercial. You all know what we're talking about, I'm sure. Okay, last bits of advice, because we're getting toward the end of the show, unfortunately. Magistrate?
I think you can't come to my office to get advice, folks. A lot of people do, and I feel bad for them because somebody says, oh, just go down to the courthouse and they'll help you out. We can't give legal advice ethically, so I really suggest that if you have questions of that sort, ask anybody but me, because I'm just going to have to say, I can't talk to you.
You have to be neutral anyway, I'm sure.
Well,
and
that's
look at
where the ethics come in. So.
Look at the the material when it comes to you.
That's a judge's job.
Jessica, how about you?
Plan early. I know that there's a lot of people who get very nervous about speaking with an attorney. It's it's a lot of big questions that I'm going to ask and difficult things that you may have to think about. But the more you plan ahead and the more you plan early, the better your family is going to be prepared for what it is that you want. They're not going to be second guessing themselves. They're going to know that they are honoring your wishes.
Got it.
So plan ahead. Things go a lot smoother when you do.
All right, good advice. All right, they always give us such good advice here on Life Ahead. Also, by the way, remember we showed you this book. If you see this at a garage sale, don't buy it because
It might be a collector's item, but I don't think it gave a lot of great advice.
keeping in mind that it's not really a legal document at all. Okay, thank you all for watching us here tonight on Life Ahead. We always enjoy your company, and we'll see you back here again next Wednesday night on Life Ahead at 7:30. Meanwhile, have a great evening and stay safe, stay healthy.
The preceding program on PBS Fort Wayne was made possible in part by
Beers Mallers, elder law attorneys, providing information on legal matters of guardianship and financial issues relating to nursing home care. Beers Mallers attorneys can also assist with Medicaid requirements and help navigate difficult family situations. Beers Mallers, attorneys at law, with offices in Fort Wayne, LaGrange, and on the web at beersmallers.com.